that people traded in their plantations for prisons because of the 13th Amendment. Keep in mind that involuntary servitude is unlawful except for when you commit a crime. So if you commit a crime, you then are technically a slave. Here we are, episode 4 of Growth and Development. Like, comment, subscribe, and don't be afraid to share this with your friends and family for their benefit, of course, their entertainment, but also for our benefit. We love to continue to learn, and we believe that there is so much to learn. One of my favorite sayings from my grandmother is, the more I know I don't know. So we love these ongoing conversations. We benefit from them because you guys have so much to offer. You guys have prior knowledge, you've done your own studies, and you share with us some things that we might have missed or overlooked, and some things that we simply didn't know. So we are open to correction, we are open to constructive criticism, but we aren't looking to debate and we aren't looking to argue. So if you have something to add to the conversation, please, by all means, comment below, message us like you've already been doing, and we'll continue to learn from one another and having these edifying conversations. So, as you know by now, we tend to cover some highly sensitive, highly controversial subject matters, and today is no different. As you can tell from the title, we are going to be talking about mass incarceration. Now, some people may believe that this is a myth. Now, we aren't in the business of debunking any myths. We are simply in the business of sharing facts and providing gems for people's growth and development. So today is no different. Today I want to present a few facts that I've gained along the years from experience and from reading and studying. And I actually received this particular study that was done from the Rutgers, I hope I'm saying the name right, and forgive me if I'm not, Rutgers University. I believe they're in New Jersey. They did a study back in 2014, so I want you guys to keep this in mind, because over this 10-year time span, some of the numbers have changed, and hopefully they've changed for the best. Some of them have decreased, and some of them have increased. And this study is on children and families of the incarcerated. This is a fact sheet, actually. So I received this back, I believe, in 2019. So I went through a couple of my files in order to pull this out, and I thought that it would be very helpful. So please forgive me that I'm gonna be reading off the paper. However, I didn't want to miss anything, and I am looking to provide the cold, hard truth, the black and white, and there's no gray area about it. And as I'm reading, we can discuss it. So with that being said, I'm going to start with the children and parents in prison, the demographics. So it says here that more than 2.7 million children in the U.S. have an incarcerated parent. That is 1 in every 28 children. Approximately 10 million children have experienced parental incarceration at some point in their lives. 1 in every 9 African American children, 1 in every 28 Hispanic children, and 1 in 57 white children. There's something that people are familiar with that it's called an adverse childhood experience. The acronym is ACE. Some of those adverse childhood experiences consist of sexual, physical, emotional abuse. It consists of living with a parent or a family member who has mental health issues, or substance abuse issues. It consists of a child who has been exposed to racism or a child who has been exposed to poverty. And these are all issues that create, or challenges that create, adversity in a child's life that they carry into their adulthood. Now they are recognizing that any household that a child lives in that consists of a parent that is absent due to incarceration creates adversities in the child's life and their growth and development into their adulthood. With that being said, it also increases the likelihood of foster care. Now, like I said in a few episodes ago, foster care and adoption is a whole nother subject matter that I am not looking to cover as of yet, because I haven't gained enough information about it and I don't know enough knowledge about it. But for some of you, some of our supporters and subscribers, you are familiar in this area, and I am looking forward to learning more about it. Now, as I go on with some of the studies that was done at Rutgers University, it says that 25% of children live with their fathers when a mother goes to prison, versus 90% of children remain with their mothers if their mother goes to prison. So that's 25% of the kids stay with their fathers when the mother gets incarcerated, but 90% of the children remain with their mothers if their father goes to prison. 50% of children with an incarcerated mother live with their grandparents. In the child welfare system, 1 in every 10 children are in home settings is living with someone who is on probation. So I didn't do much studies on how many people are on parole or probation. Well, I know parole is different because parole, you're technically still serving time just at home. So they may, depending on if they use an inmate number or not, then they may still constitute that as the inmate population or prison/jail population. Whereas if you're on probation, that's a whole nother study in and of itself. So another study was done from the American Civil Liberties Union. The acronym is ACLU. They were founded in 1920, and they have a headquarters in New York, and they also have, to my surprise, they have a legislative office in DC. Now, the ACLU is a nonprofit organization that defends your constitutional rights. They did a study, and in their study, they say that 1 in every 3 Black boys are expected to experience prison, and 1 out of every 17 white/Caucasian boys are expected to experience prison, which is a very huge difference. But I don't want to focus our studies on Black versus white. That's not what this is about. This is an American issue. Whether you are Black, white, Spanish, Asian, or Native American, all of our households, to some degree, not all of them, but a large percentage of our households in our communities are affected by a parent being incarcerated. That's what the focal point is. As I continue, there are so many different things to cover, but one thing I want you guys to understand is that in the United States of America, we have about 1.8 million people incarcerated. If we are talking math and we're doing numbers, we'll sum that up to 2 million, right? We have 2 million Americans that are incarcerated. The top 5 countries that that have high incarceration populations consist of America being the leader, and second is China. Third is Brazil. China has 100,000 less inmate population than us, which isn't much. But then it drops dramatically when it gets into the fourth place, which is India. Now, India's population as a whole is, I want to say it's about 1.4 billion people, and they only have a little over 300,000 people that are incarcerated. So, how how is it that someone with such a large population as a, over a billion people has less than 500,000 people incarcerated, or a little over 250,000 people incarcerated, where we have 2 million people incarcerated? Um, there are so many questions. One of my questions is this a systematic problem, or is this a mental health issue? There are so many questions that can be asked about this. What I can say is that I personally was not affected as a child with having a parent incarcerated. Neither my mother or my father were incarcerated. However, my children can't say the same. I have served in total a 52-month period, which is, I believe, 4.5 years in prison. I experienced jail and prison. Now, there is a difference. When you are in jail, a person is waiting to be sentenced, and once you are sentenced, then you are sent to a prison. Some of the people that I came across were considered lifers. They're doing life sentences in prison. What's interesting about the county jail that I experienced is it's a jail slash prison, meaning that there are people who are waiting to get sentenced, and there are those who are sentenced. The reason why it is a security level 5, 6, is because they have the lifers. They have a unit where there are nothing but lifers in there, and there are other blocks there that they are part of the general population. And they also have 2 units there that are referred to as security risk groups, SRG, which not every state has this. The security risk groups are considered domestic terrorists. They are both domestic and foreign gangs, and they are isolated from general population, where in other facilities, whether it's a federal facility or a state facility, people that are a part of the same groups are in general population and they aren't subdued to or succumb. They don't have to succumb to a higher level of being incarcerated, meaning their restrictions are so much more limited. In the state of Connecticut, the security risk group units, there are 2 facilities that house security risk groups, and the 2 facilities, they have different rules. I've never experienced being in that environment, but from what I know is that they are only allowed to take 3 showers a week, which is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they are not allowed to shower on the weekends. They are only given, I believe, an hour a day of recreational time. where they're out of their cell. And one out of the two of the facilities, they even have to be handcuffed while they are um, while they are in their recreational time. So once they leave their cell, they have to be handcuffs. I know in both facilities, they have to be monitored throughout the entire prison. Where if you are in general population and you are in the security risk group, you are able to go to the visiting room and travel down the hallways without being monitored in the sense of having somebody physically with you. You are monitored because there are cameras throughout the prison. However, with those who are part of the security risk groups, they will close both sides of a hallway and escort you to the visiting room or escort you to the medical unit or wherever it is that you're going. Um, they they I know because me as a tierman, I had to throw out the garbage, so I had to go down a staircase, and from the staircase you can see through the glass into the security risk group unit. And looking over there, they would always have the lights dim opposed to having them bright. Apparently, this is um, a psychological approach where if the lights are bright, people are more energetic, and if the lights are dull, it will keep their energy levels down, thus making it a safer environment for the correctional officers to work in. There are so many uh, disadvantages that people get when they are put in these units, where they aren't able to receive visitation from their friends. They can only receive visitation from a spouse, so you must be married, or you can only receive a visitation from immediate family members. Um, that is another uh, issue that issue that they face, because it disconnects them from it disconnects them from the community. It disconnects them from society, and it makes it harder for them to acclimate back into society. Um, with all that being said, there are many, and it's hard for me to say this because it took me some time before I could come to terms with the reality that prison saved my life. Let me correct that. God saved my life, and God used this opportunity to sit me down from a fast-paced lifestyle that I was living that consisted of um, drinking and smoking and constantly being under the influence. And now I had been given the time to sit down with my thoughts, not be distracted by my cell phone and all the apps that are on my cell phone, and not be under the influence and operate from a sober mindset. And I was able to focus. And while I focused, I took advantage of the opportunities that were afforded to me. If you don't catch a bunch of tickets, and tickets are given to you when you are getting into fights, tickets are given to you when you have contraband and you go to segregation for a number of different reasons. When you haven't had any disciplinary reports, you are able to go to college, and they have professors from colleges come into the facility, and you are able to get college credits. You take your midterms, you take your finals, and you are able to ultimately, depending on how much time you have, you can ultimately graduate while you're in prison, or you can continue to take advantage of your Pell Grant, which is a grant that is given to you, and you don't have to pay back, and you can continue your education upon your release. Um, Now, some people don't make the most of their time. One thing that I learned about the Department of Corrections, although it is referred to as a Department of Corrections, they are not responsible for correcting you. You are responsible for correcting you. You have to structure your time. You have to create a routine. Nobody's going to tell you what you have to do. Well, correction. Nobody is going to make sure you stay on top of this. Nobody's going to hold your hand through this. They're going to tell you the programs that you got to do. They're going to tell you the classes that you got to take. And these are the things that can help you when you go before a parole board. Now, I've been in front of a parole board twice. And unfortunately, in those case scenarios, I was denied both times. They did not see me as a acceptable candidate for early release, and I don't think that I had given them much of a choice due to my own actions. So I take full responsibility for the decisions that I had made, but I had to come to terms with it was a learning curve. It was a learning curve for my life where I needed to learn not to be impulsive. And I think often we make impulsive decisions where we make a decision in less than 10 seconds that can cost us the rest of our lives. And it's not just our lives, but those around us, our mothers, our fathers, our grandparents, our aunts, uncles, and especially our spouses and our children. So I encourage you to not take the hard way, not learn the hard way, not take the route that I took. I encourage you to just watch the podcast and learn from the podcast so that you don't have to go through the same traumatic experience that I went through in order to learn my lesson. There is an easier way to go about it. So please subscribe to the podcast and take advantage of the gems that are provided through the podcast, because that is the easier route than being incarcerated. Now, when I say that you have to structure your day, right? So you get three. I'm gonna also only speak to. I'm only speaking to the prison and the Department of Corrections in the state of Connecticut. Although I've heard many things about other states, I can only speak to what I've experienced. So, you are fed 3 times a day. I believe, if I recall correctly, that your first meal is at 5:30 in the morning. Your second meal, which is your lunch, is at 10:30 in the morning. Your last meal that they provide is around 3:30 in the afternoon, if I recall correctly, somewhere around that time. Those are the only 3 meals that you are provided from the state. I don't know how it's set up in the federal penitentiary or camps, because I have not been there. Thank God for that. With that being said, from that 3:30, 4 o'clock time that you're eating, you won't eat again until 5:30 in the morning. If you don't have the financial support from your friends and family, and that's even if you have your own money, if you don't have somebody that is taking your money and putting it on your books in order for you to take advantage of the privilege of having food, aka commissary, then you're not going to eat again from 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 5:30 in the morning. With that being said, in between those times and in between the time that they allow you to go out for recreation, if you are in a cell setting, you have 2 recs in a day at the facility that I was in. I won't mention the name. Actually, I will mention the name. It was Corrigan Rogowski, which is 2 different facilities. The higher level facility is Corrigan. which is also a county jail, but it's also a prison. And Rogowski is a lower level facility. I believe that the security risk is a 3-2, which means that you have less than 5 years, and you are on your way home or out of prison. So being in a high security risk facility as Corrigan, I I had two rec times. I think in the morning was about, I want to say, an hour and a half, possibly, and then in the evening would be an hour. So that is 22 and a half hours inside the cell, and 2.5 hours that you broken up, that you are allowed to be outside of the cell. Now, in that hour and a half that you have outside the cell, this is when you decide you're gonna get on the phone, you're gonna take a shower. If they only allow you to go to the gym where the basketball court is twice a week. So you have to decide which one of these things that you're gonna do during that time. Some people play cards, some people play chess. Myself, I'm someone that play chess. That's how I chose to occupy my time on top of my studies. Is I wanted to do something that had some substance and created a strategy in my life and kept the brain moving. Now my journey in the Department of Corrections is different than some people. Some people, they have a DUI, and they come in sentenced for 6 months, and they don't go to a cell environment. They immediately go to what is referred to as an open dorm. An open dorm is where you might have 118 men in one huge room that has a bunch of dividers, a bunch of walls that and in between two walls would be referred to as a cubicle, and in the cube can have about 3 to 4 bunk beds. So there's 6 to 8 men per cube, and there's no cell door, so everybody has access to everyone inside of this room. And there is maybe 6 to 8 phones, maybe 6 to 8 showers, maybe 6 to 8 bathroom stalls, maybe 4 urinals for 118 men inside of a room. And these men are from all different backgrounds, all different religious backgrounds, all different nationalities, all different cities and towns, and they all have to find a way to live together without there being any violence. Now, which brings me to my next point, that I forget where I have it in here, but somewhere in here it said that there's a study that was done, and out of the huge inmate prison population in America, only 70 to 80% of those who are incarcerated for non-violent offenses. That, I don't know about you, but for me, that's mind-boggling. That out of 2 million people that are incarcerated, 70 to 80% of them are incarcerated for non-violent offenses. That's not acceptable. There has to be another way. There has to be another form of discipline and punishment. Now, I don't have it written down, so I'm gonna paraphrase, but I'm sure I'll bring it up somewhere on the screen, where I want you to look up Google, because Google is my best friend, right? No, you can't believe everything that you read on the internet. You can't believe everything that you see on the internet. That's why I personally advise you to always do your own research and study on whatever subject matter that it is that we're covering. If you look up the 13th Amendment, the 13th Amendment says that involuntary servitude, in other words, slavery, is not acceptable except when someone commits a crime. So if you've heard of the terminology modern day slavery, it is referring to the 13th Amendment that specifically says that involuntary servitude is unlawful except for when someone commits a crime. Now, what does that tell me? Well, that tells me that, first and foremost, if you're not aware, there's somewhere around, 200 facilities that are privately owned. They are not owned by the United States of America. I was speaking with a woman from a church that I had went to, and she was around 60 years old, and she did not know that you can privately own a facility. So whether you privately own the building itself or you own the land and you lease it to the state so that they can have a Department of Correction facility on their land, which in most cases it's farmland. So you have a lot of land, you have acres of land, which you can translate that to a plantation, right? A plantation is a lot of land. A plantation is acres and acres of land owned by a family. Now, I have a hard time not believing that people traded in their plantations for prisons because of the 13th Amendment. Keep in mind that involuntary servitude is unlawful except for when you commit a crime. So if you commit a crime, you then are technically a slave to the state. You are a ward of the state. You are property of the state. Now, tax-paying citizens, for all you tax-paying citizens, I am a tax-paying citizen as well. We spend, and do your research on this, we spend approximately $80 billion a year for those who are incarcerated. That is for their bedding, that is for their food, that is for their clothing, that is for everything that they have. And in the case where it is privately owned, there have been multiple lawsuits, and I can put out a few of them. There are multiple lawsuits where the owner of the prison was pocketing the leftover money after they purchased whatever they needed to for the facility, and there was a couple funds that was left over. So instead of purchasing more food or spending money more on food or spending more money on their bedding, on their clothing, he used it for his own personal, he or she or they as a family have used it for their personal gain. So I want you guys to really be aware of the fact that mass incarceration is a business. It is not about stopping rapists. It is not about stopping robbers. It is not about stopping gun violence. It is not about stopping all of these violent acts that people use. And the reason why I say that it's not about these things is because I'm directly speaking to those who use that as their argument as to we need to put away these vicious criminals. Well, when the inmate in population is 80% non-violent, then we're not locking away a bunch of violent people. The violent people are getting incarcerated, and I'll leave that to the judicial system on who deserves and who's undeserving, because I am not going to sit here and tell you people should be locked up or people shouldn't be locked up. What I am telling you is that your tax-paying money is being put toward people who are embezzling. They're being put to take care of people, and they're being put in people's hands. The money's being put in people's hands that are not doing the right thing with the money all the time. Nonetheless, for someone like myself that took advantage of the time that I was incarcerated, I want to get back to speaking to my time and what it is that I experienced, because I kind of get a little flustered at the thought that there's modern day slavery that is not being talked about. With that being said, me being in a high security risk facility, here I was I was going to court and I was fighting a case, and I ultimately had gotten sentenced to 2 years and a day with 2 years special parole. And while I was fighting this case, I was 6 months into going to court, and I was convicted of something that was nonviolent. While I'm going to court, I was in G block or G unit, and in this block, I had recreation with a man whose cell was located right next to mine, and that man is well known in New Haven, Connecticut. In the section of New Haven, Connecticut is referred to as the Island, and his name is Kitty B. And as most people know who are aware of this man, he's serving a 999-year sentence. This was technically my next door neighbor, because my cell was located here and his cell was located here. Here I am, 6 months in jail. Here he is serving a 999-year prison sentence. And we go out into the common area where we have recreational time at the same time. And this man has nothing to lose. If he will... Now, I do want to pay respect to this man and say that he is a very humble individual, very kind individual. I don't know I can't speak to the crimes that he was convicted of, nor will I. I can only say, in my experience with this man, he was really good to me. He was really good to me. No diddy, as they say, right? No funny business in any way, shape, or form. I just say that this man was very humble and very respectful. But the danger was very prevalent that if he wakes up on the wrong side of bed, there is very little risk for him. Whereas me, I'm potentially going home the following year, and this man's never going home. He's gonna leave the Department of Corrections in a black bag, in a body bag. And I remember a conversation that I was having with him, and he told me that he had never seen Facebook, he had never seen YouTube, he never used a smartphone because he's been in prison for so long. The person that was assigned to be the barber for that block serving a 65-year sentence. I won't mention his name. He was convicted of a triple homicide, and this is another man that, here I am, 22 years old, and I'm potentially going home the following year, and this man is serving a 65-year sentence, and we are in the same space together, and I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. I think that if you are going to court, you should be held with the other people that are going to court, and not amongst people that are serving a life sentence. The person who had the laundry job for that unit serving an 81-year sentence. Now, these two men, I could also say their names. One has a dishonorable conviction, and many people in the state aren't fond of this man, and I would say the same for the other man as well. So I'm not going to mention their names, but people are familiar with them. And what I'll say is that being around lifers changed me. It changed me in many ways. And most importantly, I learned how to respect and consider the people around me. And I say that because quite often people are caught up in woe me and crying about their own situation, not realizing that they are being insensitive to those that are around them, and because people around you are worse off, and they can have a dramatically worse case scenario than you. And I also learned that you can find joy in the most darkest and lowest point of your life. You can find joy. For me, my joy and my hope came from my faith and my belief in Christ. That's who helped me in my journey. For other people, they find joy in many different things. The most important thing is to not lose hope. I seen in my first week of being incarcerated, I didn't know any better, and I wasn't familiar with the terminology recall. Recall is, most of you know, when you hear recall, you're thinking of recall on your vehicle, and there being an issue, so they have to bring all of these vehicles back into the factory in order to fix the problem. Similar, when they call a recall in prison, they are calling all of the inmates or convicts back into their cells or onto their bunks if they're in an open dorm, because there is a problem in the dorm or in the unit, and they have to fix the problem. So I was walking around one day in the recreational space, and as I'm walking around, it was my first week, and some people are so far gone, or they're too swollen with pride that they're not going to admit that they were scared or nervous. Me, myself, I was 22 years old. I was 150 pounds soaking wet. I was scared. Now, I was scared for a number of different reasons. I was scared because I was looking at a lot of time, and I was scared because it was the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. Now, you are either it's the survival of the fittest. So you're either gonna get with the program and toughen up and allow your circumstances to make you a victim, or you are going to be victorious and you are going to sharpen your mind, your body, and your spirit. I chose the latter. I chose to sharpen my mind, body, and spirit. Now, in this moment, in this first week, and I'm walking around, and they tell you not, one thing that you learn is etiquette. You learn to mind your business. So they tell you not to look into other people's cells. And I had learned this lesson a whole different way when I was around 13 years old. My stepfather, he had told me, and I'll never forget it, he told me, nosy people don't die at home. And what that means is if you out minding other people's business, you're not gonna die in a peaceful manner inside your house, in your bed, because you're always out in other people's business. So I had already learned that, and I applied that while I was incarcerated. So um, while I was walking around, I I was trying to mind my business, but I was sparing a glance here and there into other people's cells. And I'll tell you one funny story and one not so funny story. So the funny story is there was a guy that was in this block that I was on the top tier and he was on the bottom tier. And they said that this guy's blind, right? So he has the dark black shaded glasses where you can't see his eyes, and he has the stick, right, as he walks around. And I walked past his cell, and like I'm trying to keep my head straight, but I kind of spared a glance, and like I was like looking, and as I was looking, like right immediately as like I'm here's his cell door, and I get right here, and the moment that I get there and I go to glance, he like shot his head straight at me and looked straight at me, and like I was so scared because I'm like, I thought this man was blind. And I'm like, I don't know if this guy's blind or if he's faking it so that he could have a weapon with the stick. I don't know. But he looked straight at me. At the time, wasn't funny. I definitely looked forward and kept it pushing. But it's hilarious, when I look back at it. In that same recreational time, I had a life-changing experience. And it was the first time that I had heard the word recall, and they yelled it very loud, recall, recall. And everybody was scattering, running back up the staircase and going back to their cells. And at first I didn't know what to do. Um, and I figured out that I had to return to my cell. And when I returned into the cell, I seen maybe 30 to 50 correctional officers storm into the unit, and there was a medical team with them that had a stretcher, and they went to that cell that I had peered into, not the one with the alleged blind guy, but another cell that I had glanced into. And when I had glanced into this cell prior to the recall, I had seen this man sitting next to his bunk, and I didn't know what to make of it. Um, and then I later learned that this man had tried to commit suicide. And the man was being taken out on the stretcher. And when he was being taken out on the stretcher, his neck was completely crooked. He was like purple, blue, pale. And he attempted to use his sheet from his bed and tied it around the top part of the bunk and sat down. And I always think about the fact that he must have really given up hope, and he must have really wanted to end his life, because at any moment that man could have stood up. It wasn't like he was dangling. This man sat down, and from the pressure of the sheet and the way that he had knotted it, he was looking to end his life. And I immediately thought to myself, as a 22-year-old, early 20s, as a man that had graduated high school, had completed some college, who had climbed somewhat of the corporate ladder within retail and went from being a sales associate to a stock manager to an assistant manager who had goals to becoming a general manager, a district manager, and a regional manager. As a man who had done some traveling in his life and a man who was on the right path, and I made a I had made a decision that had changed my trajectory. And while I was incarcerated for the first time in my life, in my adult life, I asked myself, where am I? Where am I that a person wants nothing to do with this place to the point that they believe that suicide is an option? In that moment, I made the decision that that is not an option for me. And I hope and encourage all of you that are going through any adversities, facing any challenges in your life, that you never consider this as an option. Um and I hope and I pray that any of your family or friends that are going through these experiences, that they never consider this either. Now, I want you guys to realize that out of the 2 million people that are incarcerated, there's a study that was done according to Prison Policy Initiative. If you look upon their study amongst various of others, it says they're about 70 to 80% of the 2 million people that are incarcerated are non-violent offenders. So we have people who make their argument that we have such a large prison population due to rape and robbers and heinous crimes. But the fact of the matter is that only maybe 20% of the prison population are violent offenders, and 70 to 80% of the people that are incarcerated are non-violent offenders. Now, that doesn't mean that they didn't commit a crime. That means that we are punishing them in captivity and making them serve a duration of time in some unbearable, inhumane circumstances, and they haven't even committed a violent crime. There is no victim in the crime. And I think that we as a society should explore some other approaches as forms of punishment for some of the crimes that are committed, especially if they are non-violent. Now, I will never act as though I am a judge, because that's not my authority. That's not my place to say who belongs in prison and who doesn't. All I'm sharing is the facts, and the fact of the matter is that 80% of the 2 million people that are incarcerated are nonviolent offenders. So I think we should consider another approach. Now, I also want to share this, that for those that are parents, and primarily I can only speak to being a man, right? So those who are fathers that are incarcerated or who have been incarcerated, don't allow your circumstances to keep you from fathering. Now, I am the epitome, or I was the epitome of what it looks like to father from a visiting room, father through letters, and father over the phone. And it wasn't the best circumstances, but we made the most of the opportunity that we had. And the opportunity that we had were to communicate through letters, to communicate over the phone, to visit in person. And we were afforded this opportunity because just because I was incarcerated didn't mean that I wasn't alive. It didn't mean that I was dead. It just meant that for a duration of time, I was put on an adult timeout. And that's the way that I explained it to my children. One thing about it is I never lied to any of my children. I never wanted to be one of those people that told their child that they were going to college or that they were away at work. And now I'm not knocking any of you that have tried that approach. What I'm saying is that me personally, I want my children to always say my dad was honest with me and my dad told me the truth. So when I explained it to my child, I explained to my child that when you do something wrong and you get put on timeout, it's because you did something wrong and there's a punishment and it needs to be corrected. And daddy committed a crime. Dad did something that was wrong, and this is my punishment. So this is an adult timeout. That's how I described jail and prison to my children, and I believe that it worked and it helped them. And we don't talk about it much in my family, and I am prepared for the day that my children, when they do get older, that they have some serious questions for me and they want to know more. I told my oldest, who was very much conscious of what was transpiring and what was happening when it was happening. I at the time I did not take the appropriate measures in the state that I was in to obtain a firearm. So I was convicted of possession of a firearm without a permit. There are states, much like the state that I live in now, where it's a full constitutional state where you do not need a permit in order to own a firearm, and it is your constitutional right to own a firearm. My grandfather is a Desert Storm vet, and my father has his gun license. So we are what some people would describe as a pro gun family, or we are a pro firearm family. I would definitely say that we are a pro your rights type of family, and I didn't go about it the right way. So with that being said, what I said to my oldest while I was facing this time and doing this time, I told him it's okay to have a firearm. It is not okay to have a firearm without a license. Just like it is okay to drive a car, but it is not okay to drive a car without a license. Now, some people may think that that is me making light of the situation or gaslighting the situation. What I would offer you is that for a number of years, the number one cause of death in America were car accidents. So just like a firearm is a weapon, your vehicle is a weapon that you use daily. And if it is used irresponsibly, then there are deadly consequences. Now, to go back to what I was talking about. So me being a father from prison, it was very difficult. There were some really difficult times. I cut my oldest umbilical cord. I cut my youngest umbilical cord. But my youngest daughter, I was not present to cut her umbilical cord, and she was born while I was incarcerated. And I met my child. I seen my child for the first time from behind a glass, and that was heartbreaking. Um, Her and I are much like each other. We have an incredible bond. We have an incredible relationship. If you follow our growth and development Instagram page, you'll see my youngest is who had the surgery, and we had experienced that together. And you can feel through the camera, feel through the videos, and see through the videos the kind of relationship that her and I share. Um, Nonetheless, um, she doesn't remember that. She doesn't know that. And again, I am prepared to have that conversation with her when she gets older. Um, but different things that I went about in order to maintain that bond and relationship and that love with my children. One approach that we took with my oldest is we bought him a book, and they bought me the same book and sent it to me inside prison because you could receive books through Amazon. And I received the book, and I would read it. I would read a chapter, and he would read a chapter, and then I would write down some questions that I have about the chapter and send it to him. And then he would receive my letter, answer those questions, and then send the letter back. Now, when you don't have but so much going on in your life because you're incarcerated, it's you kind of run out of things to talk about. There's only so many times I could tell you I did 100 push-ups today. I did 500 push-ups today. So I had to find some creative ways to keep this bond and maintain this relationship with my family. So this is how we did it. We would read the same books. We would ask questions. We would have one conversation on the phone, but a different conversation in letters. And I remember on more than one occasion where a correctional officer at the end of my visit, as my family is leaving, I believe they wanted to see me leave with my family. And I remember one time in particular, I think it was two different occasions, but one time I remember in grave detail, the lady, she was teary-eyed as I had to walk back to the block. And when she spoke to me, she was like, her voice cracked a little bit, and she was like, you're a great father. And it was a bittersweet moment because in one aspect, you want to receive that compliment, and it's reassuring that the work that you're putting in, even from where you're at, that it's worth it and people see it. However, it was disheartening. It was bitter because I'm such a great father, but look at where I'm at. And then you fight those moments where I'm my biggest critic and I'm criticizing myself. However, no matter how much pain that I endured, I couldn't allow my children to feel that pain, and I couldn't allow my children to be even more absent from me or feel my absence that much more from me not calling, from me not sending letters, from us not visiting. Um with with all of the programs that are there, I took full advantage. Some people don't take advantage, and I encourage um the people that are incarcerated to definitely take advantage of the opportunities that you have to learn how to be a better parent and how to prioritize and how to love your family and how to maintain those relationships and communication, because it's already difficult being a parent when you don't have this to in front of you as well, when this isn't something that you're battling as well. Like talking with your child when they get out of school and you're like, how was school today? Good. What'd you learn? I don't remember. And it's like the conversations are dead ends, where programs and classes can help you ask open-ended questions or non-open-ended questions. I'm not 100% sure how that, I think it's open-ended questions. You guys remind me in the comments, but neither here nor there. It'll help you continue the conversation. So because of my choices, I was able to be a part of a pilot program. It, you know, there are daddy-daughter dances. Not everybody has a daughter. Some people have sons. So they referred to it as a family dance, and I was able to partake and be a part of, pioneer, if you will, a pilot program in the state of Connecticut. And it was appeared on Fox News, and we were able to have the event with a DJ that came into the facility. It was catered with outside food. We had pizza, cupcakes, candy, juice, so on and so forth. We had board games, and we were able to have full contact visits. This is once my security level dropped. And we had a grand time. It was a Dr. Seuss theme, and they had props with background drops, and we were able to take pictures, and that definitely helped maintain our relationships, our family dynamic, and keep our presence inside of the household, so that there we could have hope. It definitely kept hope alive for us. So I definitely encourage everyone to continue to pour into each other and not allow their circumstances to get to them. Thank you guys for allowing me to be transparent with you. Thank you guys for listening. And if there's any part of this that I didn't cover, this is a very lengthy subject matter that could go on, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. And as we go into the new year, 2025, we will be having guests come onto the show, and I can't wait to share with you guys who we have coming on the podcast. And there's going to be some subject matters that we double back on, so that you guys can hear some other perspectives, but also so that I can receive some more gems that they have to offer. And I think that we'll all benefit, and it'll edify one another in such a brilliant, beneficial way. So as always, I hope you guys are enjoying your day. I hope you guys continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share the videos. Follow us on our Instagram page. And until next time, guys.
I got gems, gems, gems. I got gems.